Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Welcome to KRA's The Hub podcast. This is the host of The Hub, Jonathan Overall. And we're today still continuing our series on focusing on Women's History Month. But we also have a special partner with us of KRA, Yolanda Johnson. She is the Executive Director of CASA of Prince George's County in the state of Maryland. Yolanda, welcome to The Hub.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
So Yolanda, I'm excited to reconnect with you. We've worked together here with KRA, and I do want to talk about the project that KRA and CASA are working on in Prince George's County, Maryland. But let's start off, for those who are not familiar with CASA in our audience. Can you explain who CASA is, the mission, and the role that it plays in advocating for foster youth?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for this. CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, that's what it stands for, started back in the 1970s. I believe I was probably like 6 or 7 years old back then. But it was started by a judge, Judge Sokup, or the late Judge Sokup, who passed away about 1 year ago today. He was overseeing juvenile child welfare cases related to young people who were abused and neglected. And I love to watch videos and read about him because one of the things that he said is that he was terrified to make decisions about these children without having people in the courtroom who was solely there for that child. And he felt that he had a lack of detailed information. Now, when a young person is abused or neglected, what happens is they go to court and there's all of these strangers in the courtroom, right? So there are the Department of Social Services representatives. There is the judge, of course, or the magistrates. There are legal representatives for maybe the biological parent, a lot of different people. But what Judge Sokup said is that he wanted to bring in everyday people like you and I, Jonathan, from the community and train them to be advocates for young people who are experiencing foster care. So that volunteer is solely there to report on what's happening for that child, to advocate for the best interests of that child. There are volunteers. They meet with the young person, maybe find out what's going on with their school, what's going on in their home life, in their foster care life, if they're in a foster home or in a placement facility. And so Judge Sokup decided that this is what he needed, and thus National CASA was started. We are a part of what we call local CASA programs. There's over 900 across the country, and in the state of Maryland, I want to say every county in the state of Maryland now has, maybe one is still developing, but now has a CASA local program. And so for Prince George's County CASAs, we're independent. Even though we do go by national CASA standards, we're independent and we have a governing board. We work alongside the Department of Social Services and the juvenile court to advocate for the best interests of children experiencing foster care. And basically what we aim to do is to train people from the community to actually have best interest advocacy, what we call best interest advocacy. And that means that basically they are committed to being trained by CASA. Also, we have case supervisors who oversee our volunteers as well, and they are committed to recognizing and respecting each child's individual needs. And we help our volunteers be an additional voice to children in foster care in Prince George's County.
Well, thank you for that overview, Yolanda, and giving us some insights into the background and really the approach that CASA takes to serving foster youth. I want to talk about your journey because you are now the executive director of CASA Prince George's County. Tell us a little bit about your journey to that role, and what was it that inspired you to dedicate your career to serving foster youth, and what helped shape your path to that point?
Wow. Well, ever since I was a little girl, I always knew that I would be a cosmetologist, Jonathan. Always wanted to be a cosmetologist. I would do everybody's hair in the neighborhood and all of that. And so I don't know if you know about vocational education programs. And cosmetology was a vocational education program in that we were offered through my high school that we could go to in our junior and senior year half day. So I went to a cosmetology program, and the other portion of my day, I had my academics. And so when I finished that cosmetology program and became licensed, one of the teachers at my cosmetology program in that vocational education program asked me to come back and substitute teach in the same school that I went to. And having her believe in me in that way was a big thing. But then the impact that I saw that I could have on young people was also very helpful. I was also able to work with young people to train them for extemporaneous speaking engagements as well. And then the other thing that inspired me was volunteering through my own children's school at that time to be a parent advocate to go to IEP meetings with parents whose children were in need of special support through school. And what that showed me is that there are so many people out there who do not have access to information, who do not have the words to say. They don't always feel comfortable advocating for their own children. So having that teacher who asked me to come and teach was one inspiration. And then the other was volunteering in the community as a parent advocate for parents whose children had IEPs or individualized educational plans. And that started my trajectory in working with young people. When I moved here to Maryland from New York, I sought out an area to work with young people, and that landed me with the Department of Juvenile Justice in the state of Maryland. And I always say I grew up professionally there because, again, I had people who mentored me either formally or informally and placed me in leadership positions, even though sometimes I went kicking and screaming, Jonathan. And it was a wonderful experience. One of the things I will mention is there was a program called LDI, the Leadership Development Institute, that the state of Maryland had at that time. And my supervisor had me apply for that program. And I took that program. I want to say it may have been maybe a 6 to 9 month program on top of my work assignment. Having things like that, whether it's in a nonprofit, a corporation, whatever it is, government job, it is important to have places where people can tap into their growth, tap into their own leadership abilities, and also tap into their own understanding of who they are, because that particular leadership development program was a lot about inside out leadership and not just leading people, but also leading yourself. So that was a big factor in my entire leadership trajectory.
That's great. And I know there's no cookie cutter formula to leadership. It's a mixture of opportunities, experiences, challenges as well that we overcome, getting to that path. And unique opportunities that are made for us. So thank you for sharing that, Yolanda. Let's talk about the services and the support that CASA provides. And I want to start with first the challenges that foster youth face in your region, and again, generally, especially when it comes to education, career pathways, and independent living. Looking at those areas, how does CASA step in to support them in that journey of life?
Sure. In Prince George's County, there are about maybe 350 to 500 kids in care each day. And we're able to serve about 200 of those youth through our volunteer advocacy. 75% to 80% of those young people are 14 and over, what we call our older youth. That means it's critical that they are prepared to transition out because they're nearing either aging out or emancipating out on their own. And we need to prepare them and make sure that they have a plan in place for exactly what you mentioned, for their education, for housing. What does permanency look like? Will they be reuniting with biological family? Will they be landing in a foster home? What does that look like? And so what we do at CASA is we train our volunteers to look for ways to support that transition. And that could be working with the Department of Social Services to find educational programs. So we will link them with educational programs. Their mental health is really important. Of course, our kids have gone through quite a bit of trauma that affects their overall well-being and their ability to launch and sustain themselves in programming. And I'll get to a little bit more about that later, how people really need to understand when they work with youth experience in foster care, it's not going to be a cookie cutter experience, you know? And so what we do is we make sure that they're attending mental health or connected to mental health services as much as possible. We also find them like job placements through organizations like KRA if they're old enough and they want to get into a job readiness program, or even just skills building or just daily life skills. Our kids, it's important that we celebrate small wins with our kids. What could be a small win to you and I is really large for our young people. So getting out of bed every day to go to school is important. So our advocates may support them with maybe this week, that's their goal, is to help them get out of bed. And then maybe 6 months down the road, their goal is to get into a vocational education program. So we support them with that. Our advocates support them with things like that as well. As far as actual programming, we have what's called our transitional age youth program, where we make sure that our young people are connected to job readiness programs, life skills programs based on where they are. And we want to meet them where they are with that. So we're always looking for that. Partnering in the community with organizations who provide those services is really important. That's one of the things that we do, another thing that we do to ensure that young people have what they need. Also, just simple activities, Jonathan. You and I may have had somebody to take us to the park when we were younger. Most of our young people do not. So our advocates can be that additional support in addition to the foster care parent, if they're in a foster care home, to just take them to the park or out for ice cream or sit down and talk to them about their day or talk to them about financial planning if they're in that space in their life. So we provide that as well. We also have what's called the Thrive program right now. That's a 2-year program where we're able to provide guaranteed basic income for 2 years for 50 young people who have already left foster care. And so we're able to support them through that, through another funding opportunity that we had. Because what happens is that when kids leave care, they remember organizations who showed up for them. And so they come back to us. The other programs that we have for our older youth is we have what's called the Fostering Opportunities Fund, where we can help them meet emergent needs. Oftentimes, our partners at DSS may not be able to access funds immediately because they have to go through the state to get approval and things like that. So let's just say a young person needs a deposit, a security deposit on an apartment. We can help with that. And we can later split the cost with DSS down the road, and they will probably reimburse us half of that. So we have funds for things like that. So they come back to us for emergent needs, or even if they're still in care, they can come to us for that. The other thing that our Fostering Opportunities Fund program supports is again, those activities that are important. If a young person needs a camp, like a summer camp, we can support them with that. So those things that they may not be able to access, we're able to do that through various funding partners that we have.
That's great. Now, we've both referenced the work that KRA and CASA are doing in Prince George's County, specifically Project Lift, which is focused on career development, job placement, and really the focus is on engaging young foster youth where they are, whether they're ready to engage, whether they are looking to explore, they're ready to learn, or they're ready for work at every level, providing services where they are. Can you describe and share what partnerships like that with KRA and Employ Prince George's County, how impactful they are for CASA as an organization?
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this because I think right now it's really important for everybody to understand that collective impact is not an option. It is it's necessary, it's a requirement, and it's urgent for corporations, nonprofit, community organizations to come together and figure out ways to have collective impact or support young people or support those with the least access to the things that they need to thrive in life right now. And I'm very grateful for the partnership with KRA because it's another avenue for us to show other corporations and nonprofits how two very different organizations can come together and serve young people. What we have done with KRA over the past year is we were able to designate a case supervisor, so one of our staff members who actually fields referrals and actually meets with the kids to field referrals to KRA. I want to say that one of the things that has really been easy for me to say yes to KRA and helpful for us is something that I know that all nonprofits and nonprofit program folks appreciate, is KRA listened to us. You all listened to us at the beginning when I said, okay, you want to work with us? We're going to help. We'll help and make sure that we refer young people, but we need to meet our young people where they are. Not where we want them to be or where a data point needs to be, but where they are. And that is something that KRA has done really well for us and understanding us, and that you all heard us with that. I understand from our case supervisor that KRA has assisted with resume writing, interviewing skills. Also, if life things happen with the young people while they're a part of the program, KRA has been able to help with that. For example, we did have a young person who needed daycare vouchers, and they also helped apply for an energy assistance and SNAP assistance. That tells me that KRA understands that whole Maslow's hierarchy of need. Yes, we may want to get them in jobs and get them prepared for jobs, but if their lights are not on, or if they don't know how they're going to eat, then it's going to be really hard for them to function. So I like that KRA is very helpful in looking at that whole child, meeting them where they are. That's been really helpful for us and helpful for my case supervisor who handles the project. Overall, we do have a couple of youth who, I believe we had one who was able to get a cybersecurity certification through the program. We also had another who I believe was trying to get, her CNA. And so there's a lot of things, a lot of good things that's coming out of it, but we also have the kids that are slow to start, right? And so we got to pull them along. And that is one thing that has been really helpful. I can't reiterate that enough, is KRA staff understanding that you have to meet kids where they are, especially young people who have experienced or are experiencing foster care.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing really how partnerships can work together at the ground level. I think, partnerships don't happen without intentionality. And I want to thank you as well for your listening ear as we work together. We listen, you listen. We came up with a plan that really address those needs. When you, as a executive director of CASA in your area, when you think about success and the impact, because you mentioned that word collective impact, how would you define that success of collective impact in your role?
So one, looking at what is it that the corporation is aiming to do? What is it that you're looking to do? So sometimes there's corporations who's looking to increase their employee volunteerism, right? And so maybe that's their win. And so we work together to say, okay, well, our win is that we provide access to this type of programming to our young people. And so that's our win. And so when we come together and look at what those two things are, hopefully that corporation we've been able to help that corporation lift up their need, and they've been able to help us lift up our need. Additionally, the biggest impact is when a young person says, yes, I was able to get a job through KRA, and that's ultimate, right? But then that other win is the young people who we had some impact on that we may not always see that impact while that program is still going on. We may see it later on when they come back to us. So the wins kind of vary depending on what the needs of the corporation is and what the needs of the nonprofit is. But for success for corporate nonprofit, I would say that making sure that that young person is provided access to the things that they need in order to be successful. And that makes me happy. I always do something that's called what does good look like in program planning and all of that. So maybe good looks like that we referred 50 young people to the program, but good also will look like 10 of them completed this portion. And that's why I love the KRA Lift program, because there's different pieces of it that takes them through an entire journey based on where they are. So, success looks different based on where that young person is, based on where the organization is. And if it helps the nonprofit elevate the mission and serve more young people, then that's ultimate success for me.
That's great. And I think as we're talking here, Yolanda, again, I want to thank you for your time and for sharing the impact of what's happening with CASA and KRA. And I think it really is a model of focusing on foster youth, workforce development, partnering with an organization like CASA, and the fact that CASA has a nationwide footprint. And I think for our audience, those that are out there in the workforce development world, I hope that this provides great insight as well. In closing, I want to ask you about your goals. If you were to summarize, as you look towards the future, what would you say is a goal that you have set out for your organization, for yourself, towards serving foster youth in Prince George's County? What is the impact that you want to leave as you look towards the future?
Yeah, that's really good. Several things, but I'll try to hone in on one, we want to overall, yes, three things are always important. And when people ask me, what is it that they can do to help? Is one, help us to raise funds. That's every nonprofit. Help us to get more volunteers to serve more children. But ultimately, I want CASA Prince George's to be seen as an expert organization within Prince George's County who serves foster care youth. I want us to be able to serve young people when the court says, hey, CASA Prince George's, we have a young person who needs a volunteer advocate. I want us to be able to serve the young person that needs us most. Who are those young people who need us most? Maybe that's 300 of the 500. So maybe that's, the kids who are saying, yes, I want a CASA advocate. So I want us to be able to serve those kids. And in being that expert organization, partnerships are really big to me. And so I want us to be able to working with our Latino population. I want us to be working with our faith-based communities, with our Divine Nine organizations, with our university and colleges. In Prince George's County, we have two major universities and one community college. That's major here. And so I want us to be working with higher education as well to lift up our ability to serve more young people, to bring in more volunteers, and of course, to sustain the organization long term.
That's great. Well, Yolanda, again, I want to thank you for your time today. I think that this is really insightful for our audience, the great work that's being done through CASA, through your leadership as well. And I look forward to doing this again with you because I know that the work is ongoing and there's a lot that's happening. And with that, the vision that you set forth and even the project that KRA is working with CASA, I know that there are even greater testimonials and things that are being planned and being done throughout this year. So let's do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, I'm just a little 2 years, like right under 2 years of being the executive director at CASA, but I couldn't do this without a supportive board of directors and a team of the best staff that I can imagine having to support me on this journey. So thank you. And our partners like KRA and the Department of Social Services and the Juvenile Court. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Jonathan.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, we'll see you soon, Yolanda, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.